Good afternoon and welcome to the Michigan State University Extension session for the Great Lakes Regional Dairy Conference. We're really excited to have you here, and we think we have a terrific program for you this afternoon. I first of all want to thank the four outstanding colleagues that I'm working with today. So I'm an animal scientist. I'm in the Department of Animal Science at Michigan State. But I was able to succor four of the outstanding members of the Farm Business Management team at MSU to help put this program together today. And we're going to lean mostly on their expertise. So Corey Clark, John Laporte, Melissa McHenry, and Stan Moore have some great information here for you. And they're going to work with a really interesting panel of producers today to talk through what strategic planning is all about and how it can apply to your dairy farm. So without wasting any more time, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Melissa McHenry.
Right. Hello, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about strategic planning. And so strategic planning is really charting the long-term course of your business. And so it's really a journey to get there. And it's a journey of you figuring out who you want your dairy to be and what you want to represent. And so we've set our presentation up kind of like a roadmap today. So along our road, we're going to have our first stop with me, which is going to be, why is strategic planning important? And then we're really going to move on to the stars of our presentation today, which is our dairy producer panel. And then the third stops will be with Stan Moore and John Laporte, where we'll talk about data analysis and knowing your numbers and how that ties into strategic planning, and then some tools to help you evaluate and implement those different strategies. So Barry, if you could advance the slide, please. So what is strategic business planning? It's essentially just charting the long-term course of your business. So it's stepping back out of those everyday to-day fires that you might be fighting to just keep your dairy going and asking, are we doing what matches with our values and who we want to represent? And what does that mean that we should be doing into the future? So it's taking a step back and really trying to understand what you want to represent it as a dairy producer, and thinking about what some of your long-term goals might be. Barry, can you advance the slides? So there's four different components that we're going to touch on today related to strategic business planning. And so the first stop is really just understanding and creating your mission statement and writing your goals down. So mission statements represent your core values. It can be something as simple as, I want to produce nutritional milk while also providing a great place to work. It might even represent, it doesn't have to necessarily represent profitability, but it could be to make a good living for my family. So it's whatever those core values are to you. And then you will, once you kind of look at your strategic direction, you'll write down some goals to help you work towards that long run mission that you set forth. And then the next stop is looking at internal analysis. So evaluating, what are your strengths and weaknesses? What resources do we have? What skills do my team members have? Are we really good at making connections with individuals? Or maybe we're really great at being more efficient in our milk production. So what are we really good at within our dairy business? And then the next component is looking at external scanning. So what opportunities are out there and what threats might there be? Or something that we're currently doing right now that maybe there's a trend in the consumer market that might take that market away in a few years. So we do need to be looking at investing in something new. Then the next part is identifying and evaluating different strategies. So there's lots of opportunities out there, but how do you know which ones that you should actually consider implementing on your farm? So there might be enterprise budget tools or partial budget tools that you can do to help you evaluate the effectiveness and potential profitability implications of those strategies. And then the last step is really implementing and refining those selected strategies. So it's important to be adaptive and understand that sometimes you might have to make minor tweaks along the way to ultimately be successful. Advance, please. So why is strategic planning important and how can it help? So overall, the idea here is to make sure that your business activities are matching your vision of where you want your business to go and what you might want your management team, and a lot of in your cases that might be your family, what do you want to represent? And so it's about being proactive in those decision making. a bit in your decision making. So management is all about making decisions. And so we want your decisions to be proactive, working towards that end goal instead of reactive and just reacting to those fires. Because one day you might look up in 5 years and be like, how did I even get here? So this is about making sure that all of those decisions are working towards your ultimate end goal. And as your farm might be growing, so might your management team, or maybe you're looking at bringing in the next generation into your operation. So by sitting down and actually making a cognizant effort to talk about the long-term goals of your business, that will increase the communication amongst your team. And then it can also help you narrow down the right set of opportunities. And I have opportunities in quotes here because sometimes some opportunities aren't ones that you should pursue. So not everybody can make ice cream. Not everybody maybe should grow crops, right? We all have our core set of skills that we should be good at, but we need to find a way to narrow down and provide focus on those opportunities. Because I know sometimes we can be like, I get very excited and happen to say yes to too many things, but you have a limited amount of resources that you can only put towards a certain amount of different ventures. And by sitting down and really thinking about the strategic planning process and charting out where you want to go, it will increase your ultimate chance of success, right? That ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Well, that same thing is true here. You really need to sit down and develop these goals and take some time to think about and chart out where you want to be. And the big thing is that success looks different for everyone. So although another dairy down the road might be going into a certain enterprise, that doesn't mean that that's the right enterprise for you to look at. And I think that will come true in our panel today. So what you measure as success might look different for somebody else. And so what was successful for the Weisses might be very different than what success looks like for the Ferries. And so I think that's a great point for us to go ahead, and we're going to transition over now to Dr. Corey Clark, and she's going to introduce our panel.
Let me pop in real quick. I apologize. I forgot to mention before that we are hoping to get questions from the audience today, but please, if you go to the options menu on Zoom, you can click on Q&A, and we'd like you to just type questions in there, and we will address them sort of as it fits in. So please don't hesitate to jump in with questions.
All right, thanks, Barry. So we have a great panel today. We have three owners of three different dairy farms from across the state, and to talk about their strategic planning process and how they got to where they are. The first farm we have is Weiss Centennial Farm, and we have Joan Marie Weiss and some of her family. Her husband Roger and her daughter Margie may also be able to join us. We have Luke Haywood from Sand Creek Dairy in Hastings, and Scott Ferry from Ferry Farms in Litchfield. So maybe first I'm going to ask the panelists to just tell us a little bit about how your business currently looks. And we'll start with Joan Marie.
Hi, our farm is 150 acres that we own and another 150 that we rent. We bought a Lely robot 11 years ago, and we milk 60 cows with the Lely robot. Roger is the 5th generation to be farming here, and our daughter Margie is working with us as the 6th generation.
And I don't think I mentioned where you guys are at.
Oh, we are in Frankenmuth, Michigan. The picture on the screen right now is extended family. It's my husband and I in the middle and the back. And then Margie is, somewhere. Yeah, right next to Dad. Anything else you want to know right away, Corey?
Show the next picture and talk about what you do with agritourism briefly.
Briefly. We do agritourism. Yeah. This is a corn maze. We run a 5-acre corn maze every fall. I don't know how much time you want me to take right now versus
You're welcome to see a little bit more. We plan plenty of time here for everybody to tell, tell about their farm. So you have another minute or so. Go for it.
Okay. So we have school groups come to the farm all year long. And basically, let me give you some history. I married Roger in 1987 and had grown up on a farm, wasn't real keen on farming, but I love to teach. And so I asked him and his family if they would be comfortable with farm tours. So we started asking school kids from parochial schools, from our Lutheran schools to come out. And now we're up to about probably 1,000 kids coming out every year. Most of them come in the autumn to the corn maze and dairy farm. But in the spring, we also host another 300 kids usually. COVID bit into that this year. But so, yeah, I enjoy my job because I get to promote agriculture and dairy farming while teaching.
Awesome. Well, Luke, would you like to tell us a little bit about your farm?
Sure. Great to be with you here today, Corey. I'm the 5th generation on Sand Creek Dairy, where my father, Larry, is still active, as well as my 2 sons, Ethan and Austin, have recently entered the business. Here we milk about 1,400 Jerseys and Holsteins. Farm approximately 2,000 acres, primarily for forage, corn silage and alfalfa. We really focus on genetics and maximizing milk production and milk quality here. In 2002, we went through a fairly major expansion. We built a double 20 parallel parlor, and in 06, we built a hospital double 6 parlor. And in those parlors, we have Affy Farm, where we can intensively manage each and every cow as an individual, but still be able to manage large groups of animals. Our division of responsibilities has really evolved over the last several years. With the next generation coming into the dairy, we're able to capitalize on a lot of the knowledge of the next generation as they improve our genetics program and really kind of take us to the next level.
Fantastic. Okay, Scott, you're up.
Well, first I have to say thanks for getting me in out of this 45-mile-an-hour wind today. Everybody at the farm is really jealous of this opportunity, so thanks for having us. A little bit about myself, Allie. You can see a picture of the family. 3 kids. We're a 4th generation farm, started in 1906, 115 years ago. And I happen to be, kind of carrying this little ball that so many of the forefathers that started before us. I've got about 600 dairy cows. We also are farming about 2,000 acres, corn, soybeans, alfalfa, wheat, a lot of cover crops and no-till operation. Probably like Luke, things are pretty dry, a lot of sandy ground around us, so a lot of irrigation that we have to run in order to make high quality forages. Like Luke and the Weisses, you got to focus on good quality forages in order to make a lot of milk. And so that's where a lot of our focus is. Came back to the farm in 2008 after the passing of my father. I have a degree in finance from Michigan State. Allie's degree is in accounting. So we have lots of colorful conversations about, typically she wins those types of conversations, but because you can imagine what we do in the office, I'm very appreciative to have someone to bounce these things off of, or her and vice versa. She's not with us today, but she's a huge part of what we're talking about in strategic planning. The farm has grown over the last 10, 12 years, and we've actually taken a paradigm shift in the way that we are operating. We are, a couple of years ago, have transitioned into a retail and wholesale side of our business. We have a 250 head beef herd, and we're also utilizing some of our corn to feed hogs and utilizing them as a part of our retail business as well. So I can talk to you more about that as well and kind of how that's developed, but that's kind of a little bit of a background of what we have going on at the moment.
Awesome. Okay, so the way we've got this set up, we have some targeted questions for each of the farms because we want to talk about their tools, their resources, their approaches to this strategic planning process. And as you can see that the individual farms have a different path and they've ended up in different places. Jo Marie, you ready to go first?
Okay, sure.
All right. So bigger picture question. How did you guys kind of settle into the business plan where you're at? And you can tell us a little bit more about kind of how things are run too, but how did you get there?
Okay, so when Roger and I decided to purchase the farm from his dad, which we had been married about 7 years at that point, and we decided to buy it. We needed to find an accounting program. We found Tel Farm through MSU, and Dennis Stein came with that. And so he's been encouraging us for 30 years to, have a business plan, think ahead, and how can you keep, because we're such a small farm, the 300 acres and the 50 cows, what do you bring to the table so that neither one of us ever had to go work off the farm? And I guess we figured that living in Frankenmuth area, it's a destination for a lot of schools in the springtime and in the fall. And it's a destination for families all year long. And why not then decide, go the route of agritourism, which was kind of a little bit of a buzzword in 1990. And in 1990, our oldest daughter, Margie, was born, and I wanted to stay home. I had been working at the museum in town, and Margie was born, so we decided to do those farm tours. And the first thing that I decided was I was going to charge for them. There are several, we're at a restaurant, by the way, but there are several people who do farm tours, maybe in the spring for 3 schools or something. We decided to go the big route. We are welcoming thousands of people to our farm every year. So we carry a entertainment policy, and I have to make sure I earn enough money with my job then to pay for that policy and kind of have a profit, right? So, yeah, so we've developed a lot of different things. Do you want to ask another question, or should I still elaborate?
Well, I think you can keep going. Like over time, continue to kind of incrementally develop your business over the 90s.
Okay, so we went from doing just farm tours for schools to creating a brochure. It's a trifold brochure. It has 7 different programs that I'm willing to do. We have a motto, which is real farm, real cows, real fun. And then we have a mission statement, which is that we first and foremost produce wholesome quality milk every day on our farm. But then we also want to share our farm story and Michigan's farm story with the public. And so we worked with our Chamber of Commerce to put together programs where buses can come out to the farm and 50 or 60 people can get off at a time. Or we can have a school group as small as 5 or 6 kids come out. Our farm, in the other picture I see right now, it's the beautiful summer picture Marge took. But we have 2 houses on our farm. So the older home we have converted into a classroom with a kitchen that I can cook in. And so we do a lot of demonstration cooking as well as hands-on cooking with people. This morning, I woke up at 7 o'clock and actually made enough pretzel dough to bake 100 pretzels today. But this weekend, we'll be making 100 dozen pretzels to sell for Super Bowl parties in the area. And then I hope that when COVID is done in our state and we can get back to normal, I'll be welcoming back we do a lot with the community of handicapped people where they have something to do. They can come out to our farm once in a while. Usually, a lot of them come once a month. And so I have a lot of programs like that to do. And then, you see a barn party poster right now. And every year we do host a Weiss Farm Fest. And that is a 1-day event where we invite anybody from the community. It's on our local small radio stations. It's in our local newspapers, and you get 400 or 500 people to come out and tour the farm and enjoy dinner with us. We provide meat. We have some potluck stuff, and people get to come in and look at the robot. You see that now on the screen. They can go right down into the room, so we can talk about things. Our cows average about 31,000 pounds of milk, which means nothing to the average person. So you have to take that 1,000 pounds into 100 weights and then down into gallons of milk for people, so they kind of understand what we're talking about. But yeah, I guess that farm festival, by the way, is free. People come to that for free. So everything else is charged that we do.
Awesome. So it sounds like agritourism has been a kind of central piece of the farm for a number of years now.
It is. I would say that the agritourism this year is probably about 15% of our farm income.
Okay.
In 2020, even with COVID, 15% of our income is going to be from from agritourism. Yeah.
Okay. And what things about agritourism make it work, or what things about your farm make agritourism work so well for that? And what kind of skill sets are necessary for that to go on a farm?
You have to love people. And well, I'm going to pan over here. This is my husband, Roger.
Hi. You have to want to talk to people. You have to be open to talk to people almost any time of the day they drive in these days. And you need to be a little time for them and explain what you do, why you do what you do, and let them know that we are taking care of the animals and the soil and everything we have. Thank you.
My grandson, Alex, is eating lunch. My granddaughter, Lily, is eating lunch. And Margie's here too. Want to tell them something about what you do?
10 minutes.
What I do?
Well, we're agritourism, Weiss tourism.
Oh, why agritourism works. We're just a really, I think, open and welcoming, and people enjoy hearing the story directly from us. And I don't know, we're in a community that really embraces tourism, and so kind of fit hand in hand from that aspect as well.
Okay. So yeah, it does help, but our whole family, we love to talk to people. There's no doubt about that. We've hosted a lot of international students. We've had a lot of international tours. And I don't know, Corey, I mean, you know us, but yeah, it's just I think we enjoy people almost, or more than we enjoy cows, you know, and the dairy cows pay the bills, that's for sure. But the people bring us the joy. And so hopefully we give back enough joy to, you know, they come back again. We feel good.
Yeah. So this strategic plan really matches up with who you guys are.
It matches our personalities 100%. Yep.
Awesome.
And we're very small. We have no chance of grabbing 1,000 acres. We have very little opportunity. Frank was going to tell us you can put 1,000 cows out back. So if we do want to stay on the farm, and really for Roger and I, our income is 100% farm income. Margie does drive a school bus for Vassar Schools. She's off on a snow day today. But, you know, so she has her insurance paid through them, and she has a pension plan through the state of Michigan and stuff. But other than that, she's helping us on the farm. She does all the breeding, all of the calf raising pretty much. Roger's more now into the crops of it, and she's into the dairy end of it.
Awesome. So hang out, because we'll come back to some questions for kind of the whole panel.
Okay.
But I'll step into asking Luke some questions if you're ready.
Yep, sure, go ahead.
All right. So in terms of your strategic planning path, what kinds of management tools and approaches and stuff like that have been really useful and valuable to you?
Well, there are several different areas that we'd like to focus on here on our farm. We're trying to maximize our resources that we have and can use. We're kind of on a limited footprint here. So our genetics program has really expanded and taken off the last couple of years. We built an on-farm IVF facility where we can flush animals every 2 weeks. And so we're propagating the herd using the best genetics, and you know, everybody else is a recipient and can carry those elite genetics. We like to have animals leave as dairy animals, and so that has really diversified our farm and allowed us to capitalize on additional income or added value rather than having them leave as beef calls. And we sell a lot of dairy animals, a lot of the young stock. We also sell the surplus as dairy. We've been genomic testing for probably 10 years, and so we keep the best and we sell the rest, I guess, if you put it that way. But that allows us to, you know, advance the genetic lines that we want to, and you know, utilize some of the other ones in a recipient capacity. The breeding goals have really changed full circle the last few years, as our co-op has implemented kind of a supply management or a quota for us for volume, but we can sell as much fat and protein as we want. So we really have targeted breeding goals to achieve high solids, milk, fat, and protein. And so the mindset of keeping that 100-pound bulk tank average has changed a little bit. We still like to drive the peaks because ultimately solids will follow high milk production, but from a larger perspective, you know, pounds of fat and pounds of protein that we can sell really affect the bottom line the most. Our feeding program has always been very aggressive. We've always wanted to feed the most digestible forage products we can to our milk cows. In recent years, we've tried to go the extra mile. You know, the BMR corn silage that we feed, is it a BM3 genetics versus a BM1 where you have an additional 5% in NDFD? Is the starch, the soft starch, and highly digestible or available like some of the newer products? As well as switching gears and going to low lignin alfalfas. So, you know, as we look at our milk cows and expect more and more out of them every day, we want to put something in them that we can see a response and you know, maximize the amount of volume that's in her rumen. I think also we look at feed additives when we're trying to maximize fat or protein. You know, will the palmitic fats give us a boost in milk fat and pay for themselves, or the additional amino acids that we add to try and drive protein an extra 1/10 of a point? And so we try new things whenever they come out. We want to make sure that they pay for themselves, that they pencil out, and that we see a positive response both with milk production and financially. Our calf program, I think we've kind of developed a new accelerated feeding program in recent years. We've always fed whole milk, always. I mean, the last 10 or 20 years, I would say. But recent years, we put in an auto feeding calf robot barn, for better terminology. And so we feed a real aggressive feeding program with pasteurized whole milk and a protein balancer. And then we try and grow them quickly and wean them quickly as well. You know, some of the traditional 8 weeks on feed, sometimes that gets shortened a bit as we're able to achieve higher growths and try and move those animals through the system faster. Herd dynamics, I kind of mentioned that our co-op is limited our milk production. And so we've diversified into jerseys quite a bit. Number one, so we can maximize fat and protein, but number two, we want to maximize our fixed resource, our milking parlor and our freestall barn. So we found a happy balance of probably 2/3 Holsteins and 1/3 Jersey to maximize the parlor capacity, maximize the freestall barn, and ultimately meet the milk quota that we are allotted and sell as much as we can. And then again, focusing on less water and more solids to try and impact the price as much as we can. So that's kind of in general the resource aspect that I like to focus on.
Well, that brings us great to a next question. Expanding. You guys have expanded quite a bit, and it's a capital intensive process, takes some resources. How have you handled that?
So I think with any business model, you have to do a lot of research. We spent a couple of years just touring other facilities in Michigan and Wisconsin, Minnesota, surrounding states, mostly to learn from other successes as well as their mistakes. We had in mind kind of what we wanted to do, stick with, you know, the traditional milking parlor. Robots were not really on the market in the US in the early 2000s when we made that decision. We considered a flush barn. We toured a lot of flush barns in Minnesota, and we figured out that in the middle of winter, when it's in the teens, flush barns are probably not for us. So then we made the decision to go to cable scrapers. And so by learning from others' mistakes, I think has really helped us in our decision-making process. The planning aspect, that also is very time consuming. You know, coming up with cash flow projections and budgets. We utilize the MSU Telefarm team extensively throughout this with the fin flows, where we could project what, given certain scenarios, what what we could possibly do. And ultimately, the reasons we did that was to secure financing, because we had to select a partner that we wanted to work with long-term. You know, once we selected the partner, we're likely going to stick with that partner. And we selected Greenstone Farm Credit. It was back in the day, they're still called Farm Credit. And we worked with a local lender, the agent, through this process of the fin flow projections and cash flow. And this relationship really developed and was very important even after the expansion. On an annual basis, you know, we want to take them the financial analysis, so we call them Finan, through MSU Tell Farm. So every year we'd like to show them our progress and, you know, keep them in the loop on how the farm is doing. You know, did we make any money? Where are our strengths? Where are our weaknesses? And so, you know, partnering up with a lender is really a long-term investment for us. We entertained several lenders, and the one that we chose, we had a comfortable working relationship with, and that really has grown and blossomed over the years. And then, like I said, just relying on the team of the experts from MSU Tell Farm that can tell us, you know, successes of others and tell us what we can be working on to kind of fine tune some of the things on our operation.
Awesome. That's quite a different path than the Weisses, right? But also really interesting on its own. And Scott, your farm has even a different story. So how have you guys gone about navigating this strategic planning process that's got you to where you are?
Well, no doubt, MSU Extension plays a heavy role in that. So coming back to the farm kind of in a little bit different way. So with the passing of my father and not being actually on site of the farm, I was in the banking industry prior to this. It posed a couple of challenges that we needed to navigate immediately. So business planning, you have to figure out what you're going to do next at the time of death. And if there wasn't a plan already established, we needed to figure out what to do immediately. And I have to tell you, Roger Betts was right there. He was right there to assist us in this process and starting to navigate those waters with my sister and I, my wife. And so we had all come together in providing those resources through MSU Extension, from accountants to lawyers, real estate attorneys. And at that time, we didn't understand what estate taxes were. We didn't understand what our exposure, our risk exposure really was, because it really wasn't our business to deal with at that time. So we had a major learning curve. So MSU Extension, with the business, once we decided that we're going to be at the farm full time, we were heavily invested into the strategic planning of what our future was going to look like. I joke around, Roger might kill me for saying this, but I got to spend my first anniversary with my wife with Roger Betts right there at the kitchen table. And I'll tell you, there isn't anybody more dedicated, because we're planning on breakfast, lunch, dinner, and a midnight snack.
And most people will know who Roger is, but in case not, he is the MSU Extension Farm Business Management Educator down in your territory, correct?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
And so much more.
Yeah. But what a blessing he was. And many of you who are in that position, or those of you that are listening, how important it is to maintain that relationship with your extension agent in that way. They're a pillar, they're the third leg to a stool, and helping to navigate those waters of maybe some of those unknown spaces. So that helped us develop our planning. We've put together wills and estate trusts and those types of things, and allowed us to develop and blossom with our goals from that relationship.
So how has your business plan come along over the years since you've been since you've come back to the farm and been working with Roger and gotten to where the business, like it currently looks, like we talked about a little while ago? What has been the process been like?
You know what's amazing? I throw that 5-year plan out the window every single year. So it's so unpredictable. We've learned to be a chameleon to our industry. We don't really ever know what the price of our commodities are going to be next month. Things have become so volatile. Of course, what are we going to get paid for in our milk? As the story goes on, it's now become a broken record. Many of us are, you feel the heartburn from that each year. So strategic planning sounds good. It works really well. You should do it, but you need to be prepared to be nimble and immediately change your course or your direction at any moment in time. So we've learned how to be nimble, especially in the last 5 or 6 years. Fortunately, Allie and I, we're not such young producers anymore as we maybe were in the beginning, but we've had to make a change, which has evolved into our new endeavor, and kind of the paradigm shift of our farm is we did make the decision that we didn't want to be 5,000 cows or 10,000 cows, or this, as the ceiling grows, we decided that that wasn't the direction that our generation, as we are holding the egg with, that's not the direction we wanted to go. So we wanted to invest, double down into technology, vertically integrating ourselves into our markets. And we established a retail and a wholesale business a couple of years ago. And in doing so, we had to do some strategic planning with that, but you really have to prove the concept. And you have to prove the concept to yourself. And then once you have some consistent things happening, you can start to build inventory. You can start to develop your marketing strategy. And then you can have confidence in taking on additional expenses. And in our case, probably the thing that's taken us now to the next level in that is we have a sales force that is working with us to help develop our brand and our products.
Can you tell us a little bit about where you started from before this latest expansion and vertical integration and stuff? Can you tell us a little bit where you started from and what that's become, kind of the what? What were you doing before, and how is it changing in what you're doing now?
We're still doing that. But it's in addition to what we're doing now. So we're still milking cows. We're still farming the land. We're still doing all of the conservation practices that were started in the generation before me. Mm-hmm. We are just milking a few more cows. We're maximizing our facilities. Every stall is filled. We milk 3 times a day. So our little double 8 parlor that was built in the 1950s is still running at its capacity. And ideally, through that business analysis, we had to learn how to create marginal revenue over the same fixed costs. And that was our original focus in developing, kind of pushing the ceiling of that marginal revenue so that you could still weather the storms of these unstable milk prices that we were experiencing.
So you vertically integrated, and now you're wholesaling and retailing and selling on the farm. And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So we have, a pretty extensive product line of different things that we're doing. We established a website. That was the first thing we did. We then have this is kind of funny, this is the most unimpressive little retail store. There's nothing very special about it, but we started a year before this pandemic. And it allows people to go online, buy their products, and then they can come right out to the farm. It's already packed and ready for them to pick up. It's outside in an open air environment, so they can grab their groceries and take off, and there is no real contact or clerk that they have to really deal with, or bump into the no offense, Mother Marcia, my mom, who would find you in the grocery store and talk to you for an hour. You can just grab your groceries and go home. So as that has evolved, we have really maximized every single option that we can with the animal that we're raising. from beef sticks, snack sticks, and jerky and charcuterie, sausages. We even do all beef hot dogs to butter and cheese that our milk is getting made into. We're taking it even further to pork, feeding pigs we're getting made into all the bacons. We also sell a lot of those products to some larger companies that are utilizing that in their food industry. So the pandemic really was a huge thing in propelling this, as people found that they were able to come and get their groceries right here locally. And when your local grocery store, big name chain, didn't have that product, they went back to the old trusted steady Eddie. It was their local farmer that they trust anyway, but now they knew that they could already buy their products right here at home. So that's propelled things significantly in that direction. And we're thankful to have the opportunity to move in that more of a vertical integration, to be a price maker and not so much of a price taker.
Awesome. So let's bring the crowd back together. And now I've got some questions for all three of you. All right. What? So where we wanted to go from here is, so as you guys have all come a long ways. And as you guys were thinking through the process, thinking through these decisions, getting ready to make changes, what is it that gave you the confidence to say, this is the right move for our farm? This is the right thing to do? Is it a light bulb moment? Was it a process? What did it look like for your individual farm? We'll start with Jo Marie again.
Yeah, when Scott was talking, it made me realize that when we decided to buy our robot in 2011, I was very concerned and about how are we going to pay for the robot when milk prices are way too low. And so we knew we were doing this tourism thing a little bit, and we started looking into other ways to grow that. And we found the corn maze concept. Well, we had seen it, but now we're dedicated to it. And we met with 2 different companies and looked at the dynamics and the traffic that goes through our town, and we were pretty certain that we were going to be able to pay the robot off in 1 year with the corn maze. Ha ha ha! Because what happened was, you make that plan, you make a business plan, and you're looking at numbers, and like Scott said, then reality hit, and that was a bad year weather-wise, and the people coming into Frankenmuth are sometimes old enough that they've walked through cornfields for other purposes in their life. They're not thinking about doing it as a fun thing. So we had to kind of backtrack. But so for the first 3 years, I think the robot paid for corn maze. But now the corn maze is a good part of our income each year. And I think it's important. You do have to have this diversification with the whole pandemic. We had a little market for our steers, and now we have last year about $35,000 in sales in beef last year off of our little farm, which is pretty remarkable. Our local butcher is 1.5 miles from us and related to us, so that's kind of help. We can get steers in when we need to. But again, yes, people are embracing the idea of the local entertainment, the local food. We are often told that we are the best sized farm out there. And I will tell anybody who visits us, if you think that's true, that milking 50 cows is the answer, how many of you in this crowd want to start milking cows? Because we need to have the 600 and 2,000 and 12,000 cow farms, because most people have left the farm with no intention of returning generations ago. So, we definitely support, and I talk all the time about big farms and what they're doing and how they are good stewards of the environment. They have the same goal that every farmer has, which is make a living and pass it on to my kids. I think that's the heart and soul of any farmer. Is my kids are here and I want them to be here when I'm gone. Okay.
Yeah. That's a great ending the answer. Luke, how about you? How do you know when it's time? Why did you know when it was time to become one of those bigger farms?
So we've always been real aggressive and proactive, trying to adapt to new technologies and maximize the resources that we have. So first of all, does that decision affect the bottom line? We've got to make sure that it's going to pencil out. And a lot of times it does not. And so you have to learn from that decision, learn from that mistake, and change accordingly. A lot of the things that we look at, does that decision allow me to do a better job? Does it allow me to take care of my herd better? Does it improve the herd health, the comfort? Those are a lot of the little things that affect our bottom line more than we know. And so does the decision that we're going to make affect the personnel's ability to do their job? Can our employees do a better job? Can they take care of our animals and our environment better? And so a lot of decisions as a larger farm, we have to be very conscientious about neighbors and are we doing the best job we can as being stewards of the land? And we've been here 100 years. I've got a lot of young blood. I want to position them to be here for another 100 years. And so what does that decision do to help ensure our sustainability? So I would say that, try new technologies, figure out what works for us, and then learn and move on from there.
Okay. How about you, Scott?
The question is, what gave you the confidence to move forward in the direction that you're in?
Yeah, the new direction you're going. How do you know? How did you know when a pivot was a good thing to do?
Listen, if you're in the boat and you're catching fish, don't move the boat. Keep catching fish. So I guess you have to have that confidence that when the fish stop catching, time to look up and see where somebody else is catching it. We didn't invent the wheel. We look around at the resources that we have around us. You want to keep investing in some technology. One of the things that we have done to strategically get into this retail side is investing in technology to be more focused on our forages, our reproductive management, our cow comfort. And one of our weaknesses that we had were the efficiency of handling our animals and focusing on our reproduction. So we invested in some technology that allows every cow to have an ear tag. They have a localization aspect of this. So I can look at this animal on my phone and watch her moving around the barns. I can see exactly where she's at. I can see her rumination. I can see her activity, and I can see her reproduction, her heat cycles. I can be out in the field and that can take place. I can have an alert sent to me and I can call back and say, it's imminent that this cow is bred at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, because we now have a better idea of when to take care of her. When it comes to the health of the animal, we don't always have to be on site, but the algorithms that are now being used is we can identify an animal that might be getting sick that will not show us clinical signs of being sick for at least another 2 days, but she's already showing signs 2 days prior to that, and we can be more on top of that. That limits our use of any antibiotic therapy. It may limit some of our necessity to call the vet. We're still utilizing them to consult with and making good decisions, but we have to be really, really efficient now with these types of dairy prices. And so that investment has allowed us to be a little more confident in taking the next step in vertically integrating our business in a different way.
Okay. So shifting gears just a little bit, how have you guys used, do you have a team of outside experts? How do you guys use outside experts in a team or individually to guide you as you're making all these decisions? We'll start with you again, Joe Marie, sorry.
Well, we went to a seminar in 1989 at Saginaw Valley State University. It showed us 5 different accounting programs that work on farms. And when we saw Tal Farm, no offense to you, Corey, but I said to my husband, I'm a history major. I have a master's degree in American history. I told my husband, a monkey could learn to use Tel Farm. That's what I need, because I got a D+ in 10th grade math, and that's as far as I've gone in math. So with Tel Farm, with the very simple accounting that they have, there's also a slew of experts who come with it. We depended on Bill Hamilton when we did the farm land contract transfer from Roger's father to him. And then we've had Dennis Stein on board with us until 3 years ago, right, Corey? I think you came in. And so now I work with Corey all year long. And then I work with Dennis to do my taxes still. He's still doing some taxes. So that's worked well for us. We have a feed nutritionist from Vita Plus, Laura Zagorski, who comes out every Friday, and she tests our egg bag haylage every week. And we use a pellet feed in our robot that's specially flavored so that the cows will come more frequently. We're getting about 3.2 to 3.3 milkings a day per cow. And what else? Oh, we have a soil science, soil scientist. Brookside does all of our sampling, tells us where to put manure depending on crop this year and the crop next year going on in the field. Definitely having good forage. We use Dairyland seed quite a bit for our products when we're growing our crops and stuff. So yeah, you don't farm alone, that's for sure. And the number one expert has been around since creation, and that is God. God is there, and he's working with us every day, and he gave us great people to work with.
All right. Luke, do you guys have a team, or are you more of a working with the experts individually kind of farm?
Yeah, we have a large team, I guess. We like to surround ourselves with specialists or experts in multiple fields. Every week, we have a veterinary that comes to do a herd check and consult with us on herd health and any other issues we might be having with the livestock. Nutritionists will also come every 2 weeks where we'll evaluate ration changes, changes in feeds and commodities and whatnot. Our agronomists and our CNMP provider, we meet multiple times throughout the year for planning, analyzing current growing conditions or problems, as well as kind of wrap up at the end of the year to see what worked and how we might change things for next year. The lender, like I mentioned earlier, that's an expert that we rely on as well as the MSU Tel Farm and extension team to make sure that financially that we're abreast on our current position and making predictions for the future. And so, kind of like even our own management staff here on the farm, we try and specialize in different areas and expertise. So like I said, I think utilizing experts and to the best of our ability is our model.
That's great. And Scott, how about you guys?
I have to echo the same sentiments, and I think exactly the same ways that you guys have. I will, first and foremost, behind every great woman is, a guy that is willing to come and do some of these focus group conversations. But Allie, first and foremost, is a teammate that I can't do this without her support. And what she does in working directly with the accounting side, MSU Extension, all of these conversations that you guys have is so critical and important. Yet we have management meetings once a month, and our key players, your vet, your nutritionist, sometimes your agronomist is involved depending on the time of year. A lot of times we have Sarah from Zoetis come out, and we're talking about some technology that we're dealing with, or some of the vaccination protocols that we're dealing with. So industry professionals are definitely a part of those meetings, depending on the season and the time of year. We just had Milker Training School with Paola this last week, and it was all held in Spanish. We did another calf training school yesterday with our veterinarian that was also held in Spanish and English. So I also have to say that our community is a huge part of where we're at today. from the relationships you have with your other dairy farmer friends and neighbors, being able to bounce ideas off freely. We don't have this sense of competition with each other. We have to hide what we're doing. We can talk about each other's problems. We can learn from each other. And sometimes there's solutions that each other has to the problem that you're dealing with currently. But also the community in which you live is a huge part of our resource team, and having great relationships. So our employees, I also have to say with a high level of importance, is they are the best of who we are. And we invest into their training and trying to make protocols so that they can be the best people that they can be as well. I have to say, there was a gentleman that has worked with our farm for 50 years. He just passed away last week due to cancer. And to have a guy that's willing to be dedicated to your farm, your family, is not just a pillar to your farm, he's a part of the foundation. He's not just the right-hand man. He's more than just the right-hand man. He is like another dad. And we're so thankful and fortunate to have people that have stayed with us. So I say the people that we get to work with every day, they are like our family, but they're the best of who we are too.
Okay. Very cool, guys. Barry, let's pause here and ask if there's any questions that have come up.
Yeah, we do have one question put in from the audience, specifically to Scott. So with your direct marketing efforts, particularly in this last year, have you run out of some products? Are there things that have been particularly hard to keep in stock?
Yeah, that's a great question. Many of you who are exposed to that side of the industry knew the challenge that butchers and processors faced on trying to keep production up during that pandemic. They were losing employees, didn't have the ability to process product fast enough. Fortunately, having started this endeavor a little bit, a year before that had happened, we were already working with 3 different butchers. And so we had, supply lines that were still constructed to continue moving product. Not to say that wasn't a challenge, it certainly was a challenge. And they were under an immense amount of pressure. But at the end of the day, it was, there were some times where, we're getting short on ground beef, but when you're out of product, it's okay to take a pre-order. And I think it's important you get on the list for that pre-order, and you should definitely be on the list for that next quarter, half or whole, because I'm telling you, we have no idea when this is going to end. So we better stock up now.
That's great. Thanks. Since we're talking with you, Scott, I got to throw something at you. I think one thing you said when you first kind of laid out your situation was really important. So you said, every 5-year plan you guys have written, you've had to rip up. And, not only within a small business, but even within a big organization like I work in, people kind of tend to roll their eyes about strategic planning. But you said you have to do it. So why? If you rip it up every time, why does it still have value to do this process?
I think that's a good question. I think you fundamentally need to keep your thumb on the pulse of your business, and you need to be attempting to project what is coming at you. And, if you're blazing a path for the first time on your own, you have so many unknown things that are going to come at you anyway. But you have to look at your business in a way of enterprising it so you can stay focused on the things that are adding value or returning the greatest amount of return to your investment. So if you don't have your thumb on that pulse each year, then how are you going to be able to weather the storms from all of the unknown factors that you're going to experience as well? So no, I think you have to continue doing it.
Well said. Thank you. Okay, if anybody has questions, please throw them in the Q&A section. Corey, back to you for now.
Okay. Well, we actually have time for a bonus question. And one of the things we were wondering is if you could go back and tell yourself something when you started all this, what would you go back and tell yourself before you started making all these changes? Well, Luke, let's start with you this time.
Okay, get unmuted here. Plan for growth. When we were visiting tours one farmer says, well, build your parlor twice as big as you think it should be. And he was exactly right. You know, if you don't adequately plan for growth, it makes things much harder in the future. And even though it's hard to convince the banker at the time, the cheapest time to do it is when you're doing that initial expansion, because in 10 years, it's going to cost you double. So if there's any way to cash flow it and plan for it, you know, really do that. And even on our footprint here at our dairy is, we started out, we had plenty of room. Well, it's a pretty tight footprint now. So, you know, try and plan for more growth than what you think you could possibly need. I'd also like to say capital investments are well worth, spend the money, do it right. We had a lot of opportunities to cut corners, to try and reduce costs, to keep a smaller budget. But ultimately in the long run, we want to build this thing to last. And so there are a lot of things that we could have spent more money on for capital investments. You know, we should have put the insulation on the ceiling in the barn, you know, just little things that you don't think of that really could have paid big dividends. After 10 years, you wouldn't have to replace a barn roof. So a few pennies here and there really could add up in the long run. And lastly, I'd say learn from others' mistakes. You know, we thought we did the best decision that we could, talking to as many farmers, but ultimately just take a few minutes and listen to their mistakes and try and avoid some of your own pitfalls.
Those are some good lessons. Joe
Should we
Marie, how
jump
about
in?
you guys?
Oh,
Oh, what,
sorry.
Barry?
We have like 4 minutes left before we go to the last section. Should we jump in with this last audience question, maybe?
Sure.
I'm sorry. I think it's a good one, and we'll just throw it out. I guess if anybody feels like they have some thoughts on this. The question is, who should be involved in strategic planning? So think about employees. What level of employees should we get input from? What about family members who may be sort of involved on the periphery, but not in the business every day? Any thoughts on this?
Roger and I are getting very close to retirement age. And so I guess you guys look younger than me by a long shot. So yeah, on our farm right now, it's Roger and I and Margie that are working on the farm, and she will be the heir apparent. But we have another son who loves to cash crop farm and works as a diesel mechanic over at Card Brothers in Chesaning, and a daughter who works at the local slaughterhouse and also likes farming. So honestly, I'd say at least once a week, the five of us will sit down together with other people and talk about what we're going to do the week ahead or the month ahead. And a lot of the ag tourism stuff really depends on everyone being there together. But I think that when it comes right down to it, whoever has to pay the bills, that's Roger and I, we have to make a lot of those decisions on the small farm, taking into account that, you know, Margie wants to maybe buy a robot. Okay, how are we going to do that? And she helped us solve that problem. And so when she comes up with ideas to spend what we consider big bucks, you know, we also have to have a plan how we're going to pay for it. You know, and I can only say after 34 years, it's amazing that your other question, I don't know what it was, but my answer was going to first be, don't worry. I mean, if you're a good farmer, and I think all three of us sound like we've got our act together, we should be doing pretty good.
Well, a big thank you to all our panelists. Very much enjoyed hearing your stories, and I'll hand it back to Barry.
Thanks a lot. That's a really nice note of hope, I think, to transition over on. And so next, Stan Moore is going to dive into some details on how to help, I guess, those in the audience to maybe tackle one of their first strategic planning processes themselves.
Right, and so John is going to share some slides here for us, and looks like he has those up for us to look at. So I just want to start out by saying thanks a lot to our panel for speaking today and really giving some great insight into
What do you want to say?
how they went through the strategic planning process. You know, I think as I looked at my first slide here talking today about how our farm management team can assist farms in this process, I looked at these 5 goals and boy, it sure came out in the panel how each of these were handled. Obviously, each farm planned their strategic plan, went through their strategic planning based on their own goals and values. I heard Joe Marie talk about their strengths of liking to be with people and interacting with people. And boy, that's pretty important if you're going to do what they're doing. All of them talked about really surveying opportunities and threats out beyond the farm. And Luke and Scott both talked about going out to several farms and looking at what they were doing and what would apply to their farm. You know, do they have the strengths to be able to do those, respond to those same opportunities and threats on the farm? All of them talked about the importance of accuracy and reliability of farm records analysis. And then I was really impressed by each one of them giving an example of ability to act on that information and see the change that needs to happen quickly and respond to it. I know one mentor that I look up to said that, you know, the thing that set a lot of farms apart in their ability to be profitable, sustainable farms into the future was how quickly they could react to situations that were presented to them in a way that made sense, that played on their strengths. And so you saw lots of examples of that with Luke talking about switching to jerseys as the co-op limited their milk production, or Scott looking for new opportunities and you know, planning, but being willing to throw away that plan and start over again the next year. So just appreciate the panel and what they shared with us today. So what John and I are going to attempt to do in the next 20 minutes then is to talk about strategic planning, but really focus in on that, the second bullet and the 4th and 5th bullets as we move forward and talk about, you know, again, how our farm management team could work with you as producers in the strategic planning process. So John, could you go to the next slide? So when we're looking at strategic planning, kind of that first level of strategic planning is really understanding, you know, a bit about your business. It goes back to that strengths and weaknesses. And so to really be able to do that, we have to have accurate records. We need to know what our production data is. We need to know what our financial data is, and really be able to accurately portray what our farm is doing. It's kind of getting that picture of the whole pie and saying, you know, how well is our farm doing along a number of fronts, whether it's production numbers, whether it's financial numbers, you know, how do we measure up along those lines? And therefore, do we have the capacity to do some things that we'd like to be able to do? It gives us a chance to then begin to understand our basic cost of production. We can do some simple cost of production numbers. If we want to go beyond that, and I heard Scott mention this at one time, enterprising, you know, looking at the enterprise level is really the next step and saying, okay, do I know how well my heifers are doing as an enterprise versus my milk cows versus this new beef business that I've started? And am I keeping track of that and allocating those income and expenses to those different enterprise? Now we can really start to do some strategic planning based on what should grow and what should disappear from our farm. Next slide. So on the whole farm analysis front, it really, again, is looking at capturing a production year. So we're kind of looking back and saying, how did we do in 2020? When this gets really powerful is when we've got a number of years on the telefarm system. We can look at, okay, comparing the last 10 years, what are our trends? What directions are we going? So it tells us how much money did we really make on the farm? Not just what the cash flow was, but how much money did we really make? course, if you're going to get to that, it requires some information, and it requires, of course, the basic of income and expenses that you would do just like you do with your taxes. So everybody has that information. Hopefully it's good, accurate information. But then we have to look at, well, what did we start out with at the beginning of 2020? What did we end up with at the end of 2020? And then we can accrualize that income statement to get a true picture of what the farm did that previous year. Next slide, John. So just as an example, you know, if we're looking at a dairy farm and we've got some income, we've got $150,000 of income, we've got $120,000 of cash expenses, we'd look at that and say, okay, that farm made $30,000. Looks pretty good. Smaller farm, but they're profitable, and that's where we want to be. But are they profitable? Well, let's make some adjustments here. Let's accrualize this. So maybe we've had some inventory changes. So if I look at the balance sheets and at the end of this year, at the end of 2020, I have $40,000 left compared to less in inventory compared to the beginning of the year. Now I have to subtract that 40 from that 30, and boy, I guess I didn't make money. But that's not the end of our allocations or our adjustments to it. We also have to adjust for prepaid expenses. So we all take opportunities at the end of the year. Maybe there's a good buy on fertilizer or a good buy on seed. Maybe we're pre-purchasing for income tax purposes. So we have to adjust for that as well. So if we look at all of these together, now we're looking at, okay, we had 30,000, but we adjust it down because we have less inventory at the end of the year, but then we adjust it back up for prepaid expenses. And this farm made $5,000 in net farm income. Again, you say, well, why is it? Next slide, John. You would say, well, why is that important? Well, if you're really going to start to be able to project, make that strategic plan, look into the future, we have to know what our current farm is doing. Okay, what does that picture really look like? And so we've added now to that IRS tax return kind of step one information. Now we've changed it. We've adjusted it for inventory and prepaid expenses. Go ahead and add the rest of the bullets there, John. And so it really does create a foundation to understand what our cost of production is. You know, when we're working with a farm, we're really looking at three big numbers on farms. John, you can go to the next slide. We're looking at, we always talk about, you know, how is the farm doing net farm income? Are you profitable in that production year? How is the farm cash flowing? And how is the farm doing net worth? Are you improving net worth, or is it going down? And you can have a positive net farm income and be negative on something else in this scenario, depending on how the farm is structured. So in some cases, these numbers tell us what needs to change in order for this farm to get to the position where it can take advantage of some of those opportunities that we're looking at in strategic planning. We need to know whether we can actually have the ability to act. Well, we can actually go and do a cost of production based on each one of these and say, okay, for milk, if I'm going to have a positive net farm income, what is my cost of production for milk in order to have a positive net farm income? What is it to have a positive cash flow? What is my milk price need to be if I'm going to have a positive net worth? So we can go through and work with a farm and see how each of those go, really get an idea of where the farm sits. Of course, the next step, as we said earlier, is moving to that enterprise analysis level. And for that to happen, we have to take that whole farm analysis. We have to feel comfortable that we've captured what's there, income and expense wise. We really understand what the farm did in that year. And then we can add to that and allocate those expenses to the different production areas. So for instance, on this slide, we've got the milking herd and the dairy replacement heifers. So enterprise analysis is simply allocating pieces of that pie. We have the whole pie there. Now we're going to say, well, how much of that income was due to dairy? How much of it was replacement heifers? So our dairy farm, our dairy cows have to buy in those replacements. And so there's an income associated with replacement heifers as well as with the dairy. And we can start to say, okay, what part of my business is actually making money and what's actually taking away profits? And then can I do something with that enterprise that's taking away profits, or do I need to drop that enterprise in order to be more profitable? Or maybe there's another enterprise that I want to take a look at. So that's where we really get some strength in strategic planning. Next slide. And I think, John, you are taking over at this point.
Yep. So as Stan has outlined, there's a lot of powerful information in kind of getting down to that cost of production, especially when we think about enterprising. And knowing last year's cost of production really doesn't just tell us where we've been, but it also helps us start in the thought process of where we're going to go and looking at the next year's budget. Overall, what we really want to find is to be able to help identify what those risks are that need to be managed, what changes need to be made, and then actions to be taken. We heard a lot of great examples of that process during the producer panel. And one of the other things that we wanted to highlight was that this process often leads to looking at some break-evens, which are a very useful tool for farm managers, and one of those go-to type things that managers look at because it's a really easy indicator to be able to look at where things are at on the farm. And a lot of cases that break-even analysis helps with some key decisions. We often think about break-evens for securing revenues, a lot of cases for your marketing, but we also use it for evaluating input prices that we want to reduce or minimize, especially if we're talking about, the examples earlier, we're trying to lock in some inputs at a favorable price. But you can really run a break-even on a lot of different areas of the farm to get an idea of how it compares to, is it a strong area, a weak area? What do you need for certain aspects of the farm? And so the question often comes up, what break evens should the business be looking at? And as Stan kind of illustrated earlier, we kind of look at three big numbers or three big areas of the operation. We recommend a break even on net farm income, where we're talking about being able to cover those operating costs, a cash flow break even, to think about paying for our financial debts and any obligations we've got out there. And then also a net worth break even to see, are we producing enough to actually add some overall value to the business? And a lot of cases you can evaluate these by looking at the market price that you're getting paid for your production, or at the production level. And to illustrate how these get used, I wanted to demonstrate here, just provide an example of a dairy farm that is kind of a scenario we see a lot of cases for farms here the last couple of years. If we've got a farm that production is about 24,000 pounds per cow, are we looking at a case of positive break even in terms of covering our cost with that production? And then if we look at a market price of $18 per hundredweight, are we able to actually cover expenses at that price? All kind of questions that come up very routinely on a farm. And what we've seen here over the last couple of years is a pretty common scenario where we have farms that maybe are able to cover the operating costs and have that positive net farm income break even on both a price and a production level. But getting into cash flow and getting into net worth coverage, being able to cover those debts or add value, becomes a bit of a struggle for operations. And that often leads to some of the conversations that farms have looking at their strategic planning of, well, how do we kind of change that? What are some different ways that we can kind of go about improving the overall profitability and cash flow potential of the farm to eventually add to that overall value of the business? And so this really is getting back to the idea of you have to know where you're at and be able to evaluate as you're going forward. And so I also want to kind of throw in a quick word on benchmarking, because you heard in the producer panel a lot of folks doing the financial analysis, and that's a great gauge of where your farm is at. But the other gauge is to be able to compare yourself to the industry and know exactly where you rank kind of within either your state or within kind of a general location, say the Midwest. For dairy farms, we especially look at what's going on in Michigan, maybe in Minnesota or Wisconsin, some close by dairy states, to try to give us an idea of where we're at. And so with benchmarking, what we really have is participating farms that provide those records into the database for other producers to compare against, and for you yourselves to be able to compare against. And they look at providing that financial level and that management level information, the whole farm or the enterprise view. Because what it allows is farm managers can use that information to recognize what is already being very successful from not only an individual standpoint, but how does that compare to that industry? When you look at the industry, what are some areas of improvement? How are other farms handling some of the same concerns or situations that are happening across the whole industry? Where do you kind of rank up? And it helps to narrow down, in a lot of cases, who it is you need to ask for assistance for when you're looking at that comparative information. And from a strategic planning standpoint, it really starts to help you in that critical thinking of, well, what are those goals we really need to focus on for the upcoming season? What are some ways that we can actually address those, or at least begin to look at that? And benchmarking kind of helps with that, and also in kind of the next part of our strategic planning, and that's really evaluating alternative strategies. And for small changes, we recommend looking at doing a partial budgeting, where you're looking at what the changes and are going to be from that one action, that one change. How does that add to or take away from the business? For large changes, we recommend doing the financial long-range budgeting, or possibly a cash flow projection. Some of the producers on the panel mentioned doing a fin flow and looking at that financial projection of how does these changes impact the overall profitability of the business moving forward. And kind of an example here on the screen is, if you're looking at getting into dairy replacement heifers, what is, if that's going to be a new focus of the operation, or you're trying to decide how does the farm compare to that, that projection and being able to compare against the industry and then looking at the farm kind of helps with evaluating those alternatives. The next step is then kind of looking at how do you start implementing and refining strategies. I think we gave a really good example from Scott. Heard that example of every year kind of evaluating that business plan and throwing it out, because they're annually reviewing where their farm is. And so every farm that takes the time to annually review where those farm financial records are at can kind of get an idea of what is the strength of the business, how is that plan moving forward. And then if you're comparing to other farms, you can kind of see how that information and how the direction of the farm is really stacking up to those in the industry, to further give some insight into, well, is this really going the direction we want to be as we're trying to work within the industry and be competitive? Because we want to be able to not only contribute our information to the database, but we also want to be able to look at ourselves and say, are we continually improving in order to stay in maybe in that top 10% of farms? Because we all want to be successful farm operations. And so we make sure we're kind of comparing ourselves not only within the farm, what the business structure is, but then also looking at similar operations within the industry to see, is that direction really going forward? And then I've got the slide in here to kind of plug the MSU Telefarm program, but our panelists did a pretty good job of that already. What Telefarm actually provides, it's an educational service that is designed to help producers with these financial farm records and going through this decision-making process. Program participants receive record keeping support, especially in what we call the levels 2 and 3, or what Stan explained as the whole farm or enterprising type record keeping and analysis. And then we actually offer the opportunity to sit down and do a financial analysis every year with folks, and then be able to compare and look at how the farm really stacks up against the industry. And it's a really great resource for producers. We have the web address here in the slide, and we'll make sure to get that into the chat as well for folks. And then I also just wanted to kind of end with really highlighting for farms as you're thinking about strategic planning. And I think the producer panel really described this, that navigating your farm success is still largely up to your farm. And it's kind of looking at back to goals and strengths and weaknesses, and really kind of fits what the overall goals and plans are for the farm, to figure out what's the most successful opportunity for the farm to kind of pursue. And then the last thing I want to highlight for folks is that we do have a handout with some information on how to help you kind of start your own strategic planning process. And there's a link that we're going to put up here to in the chat for that handout. And then we've also got it here up on the screen, a little barcode you can scan as well to gain access to that. At that point, I guess we'll open it up for questions. I'll turn it back over to Barry.
Great job, John. Thanks. And Stan, very good. Don't see any more questions right now from the audience. Any panelists or anybody else from this group today have any last thoughts? If not, thank you so much, everybody who participated, especially our panelists, and thank you to the audience. Some good questions today, and hopefully something you can take home with you. So with that, we are going to fade out with the sponsor video again, and I guess this is the wrap up for the Great Lakes Conference this year. And kudos to everybody behind the scenes who helped make this happen online this year. Hopefully we'll see you in person next winter. Thanks, everybody.